You are listening to the Fresh Take Network.
What it is, what it do, welcome to Fresh Take. Joshua Adam, William Arbuthnot, and I'm very privileged to have the Director of Athletics and Recreation and a former Olympian in Karla Karch to the podcast. Karla, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You've been able to kind of get this way. You had the opportunity to be around my sister for a little bit, so that's kind of how we bonded a relationship. But you also have a great career in basketball and the women's game and the growth of it. And obviously, we've talked to Wade Como at SAIT about the pandemic with the athletic programs, and I'm really interested to talk to you about it then. It's been an interesting year and a half, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the choice of words is really unique because I think many of us are not sure how to describe it other than interesting. And I think none of us ever want to go through it again. But the world is the way it is, and it's when, not if it's going to happen. Hopefully not for another 6 or 7 years, and then I can retire. But yeah, it's been an interesting year from an athletics perspective, from a recreation perspective as an institution, and then for personal reasons, right? Like we've all gone through this in our journeys. While probably look similar, they all have been a bit different as well.
Yeah, they really have. What kind of talk to me about, I know for Wade was talking to me about SAIT, they were in the middle of a tournament with the hockey team. Talking to Lisa Tomaitis, they were lucky enough at U of S to finish and get their championship there with the Huskies. Where were you guys before everything kind of hit the fan?
Everything started to hit the fan. I was actually out East Coast with our women's hockey. They were at nationals, and we actually got the first game in of national championships. A bit of a surprise. We went in, I think, as a 7th ranked, and we ended up upsetting the second team. Nice. In our minds, the tournament didn't end. That was a Thursday night. By Friday midday, they had canceled. Sorry, that was a Wednesday. My staff back home quickly got me home by the Friday, and another staff member. Our team had to stay out there till Monday simply because of numbers. You're traveling with 25 to 30 people. You're not going to get them on a flight. A lot of uncertainty. So we were right in a national championship with women's hockey in Calgary here that same week, our women's volleyball. And they hadn't started the tournament, but our women's volleyball qualified as well. And they had literally the Thursday they were going to the all Canadian dinner they do, the celebration, and that was canceled. And it was literally a phone call, and this is what U Sports has done. And from my understanding of it, it was I think it initiated with the hockey in particular. It initiated with the referees, the officials saying they're not going to supply officials for it because of the pandemic. And then there's, of course, a snowball effect, and U Sports oversees all of it. U Sports owns the national championships. And so at the time, gutting, absolutely just at a loss really for words for our varsity athletes, for our programs. Hindsight, it was the right decision at the time. Could they have played their 2-3 extra days? Sure. But who knows what would have been the outcome? You don't know those things. You never will know them. But when it happened, it was devastating, and for different reasons for different athletes. But you may never get a chance to get back there. It's extremely difficult to qualify for a national championship. For one, student athletes were in their 5th year. They'll never get that back. Like, they won't replay them. They won't go back and get that opportunity. And then moving into this year and all the effects of the COVID and open, not open training, what type of training, according to government guidelines, according to our school guidelines, which city guidelines, and then our school guidelines, we all had to follow. It's been difficult for them, but that I hope in time the athletes that were really affected, in particular with our 2 programs, that the pain has eased. You never forget that. You will never forget 30 years ago or 40, whenever I went to university, I remember my national championship experiences. You don't feel the pain. You don't remember the pain if you won or lost, but you remember you won or lost, right? And so I hope with time our student athletes, the pain has eased a little bit. And then as we get into this year, what of our seasons look like. Canada West has approved schedules. They're modified. A lot of focus on geographical, because when we made them, we didn't know where COVID would be. We didn't know how we could travel. In Canada West, we deal with 4 provinces. So it's not just Alberta we're worried about. We have to think of the 3 other provinces that travel has to occur. So some, like basketball, will play a very regional within Alberta, and some, like hockey, have to travel outside of our province. So how do we fly them? How do we get them on buses and the safest way possible? And almost every week we're learning some new things. This week we just recently had the mask mandate changed, right? So what does that mean? Our city changed the mask. So what does that mean at Mount Royal? What does that mean going to Saskatchewan if they still have masking in place, et cetera? So it's convoluted and complex, but our ultimate goal is to get them competing again, to get back to whatever our new normal is, right?
What's the fan situation like right now for you guys?
So right now, that's a really good question. Right now, we are anticipating fans being allowed because of the distancing rules. If we have to put in 2-meter distances or whatever it is, we would then put it in, and it would limit the number of fans we could have. If we don't have to do any, we don't have to do any. If there's no masking rules, then there's no masking rules. It becomes more of a, how do we think through if a student athlete, and we have to do this anyway, so when our teams go on the road, how do we think through getting an athlete or a team member, someone in that whole team that's traveling, how do we get them home? And we're not mandating vaccines. We're strongly encouraging, and many post-secondaries are. A few in Canada, residents has said it's mandatory. Our school is not mandating, but you'll see all our messaging go out. Please consider it. Please do it. It's the right thing to do. And that's not getting into the discussion of vaccines or not. It's just saying this is what our institution believes in.
Right.
So we have to have plans in place long before COVID of how we get injured student athletes home, how they travel if they're sick. How do we, like a flu, if a student athlete was to become violently ill, where do they go? Do we get them to the hospital? Who stays with them? And how do we get them home a day later, a couple days later? So those plans are in place. They're just vamped up and reconsidered because now we add in COVID and what happens with COVID.
And I guess it's also, you talked about the mask mandate. Well, the city has their choices. Other businesses will have theirs. And you had to figure out what's going to be the situation for players and coaches on the bench. When they're on the bench, will they still have the mask? Like we've seen, in the NBA and the WNBA, even during recently with Canada going and traveling for international stuff, that they still had to wear masks on the bench. What all that will look like, because having what we have in July to what we have for basketball, for example, or volleyball in October, it's going to be entirely different as well, right?
It could be. Who knows? Yeah. We take our direction from our government, provincial government, then our city, and then our school. And as an example, in the fall, we in athletics, under Cougars Athletics and Recreation, we actually mandated masks while training. And the government, if you read any kind of information on it, they say high level. There was the debate on, we did our research, we work with other institutions. We as an institution, in particular with varsity athletics, said, while you're training in this school, you're wearing a mask. That's not in place anymore. They don't have to. You have pros and cons. You have people who believe and you have people who don't believe. But we do have the ability as an institution to say, this is what we're doing. If you want to do it, then if you don't want to do it, you're not allowed to train. If you want to do it and we'll follow the rules, you can train with us. So that was an example of an extra measure. We're really week by week going, sometimes day by day going, okay, what's in place now? And we know the variants coming up. We know we have a stampede that could be a super spreader. So what is the end of July looking like, and how does it change our province? What does into August look like, and that change our province? And oh, by the way, we're vamping up now. Soccer starts mid-August. So nimble. You've got to be nimble. You've got to be flexible. And that is tiring. That is really tiring and exhausting to be that way. There's many of my staff, myself included, that need a break. I don't want to think of having to reopen and plan. I've got people who will be there for the 2 weeks I'm away and stuff, but it's really about flexibility and things you can't control.
Well, I know for SATs, for example, and for ACAC, I think Canada West had a little bit, and U Sport had kind of the idea of, there was that January date last year, right? But I think we were all a little bit timid about, like, I don't know, I'm not going to get too excited about it because it's going to get taken away. And that's even kind of with this, right? Like you said, soccer's coming close, but you want to get everything ready to be smart, but you're also like, if the stampede up in this city is going to be a super spreader, where is everything going to be for the city at that point? Are we going to go completely down to locking down everything again, and then we're screwed for a few more months? And so I can understand the frustration kind of going back and forth of the planning going forward with everything.
Yeah, and you plan to plan, and you can never get everything. You don't get it right. You have the best intentions, and I've probably done a dozen to 15 reopening type plans for different sections of our facility, for what the pool looks like, what programming may look like, what our varsity teams are training like, why are they allowed to train but we can't have people in the building. That's what's exhausting, but it's worth it. And I do have to get excited for our student athletes, because that's what I'm hanging on to right now for. It's going to be a really sad day if we don't have it again. And quite honestly, my personal opinion is we're in for some tough times because of this year and a half in the mental state of people. Whether you're an athlete or not, that's irrelevant. But for people, and you get 10 people and they've gone on 10 journeys of COVID and how they've dealt with it, recovered, not necessarily getting it, but experiencing the COVID environment and everything. And so really being in tune from our coaches to our student athletes. Our programs are carrying more student athletes than they have previously, simply because of injuries, because of illness. But also we had some fifth years who said, I want to come back. Or sorry, some fourth years who this would have been their fifth year said, I want to come back and play my fifth year. Good. It was their choice. Good on them. So a basketball program that would carry typically maybe 14, 15 is carrying 17 or 18.
Because you have 2 recruiting classes, right?
Well, and what happens to those first year kids who never had their first year?
Yeah.
And now the incoming class, right? So there's some work, not just the X's and O's by coaches, and not just with dealing with focusing on school. Our student athletes were fantastic with school, allowed them to a different way of learning, but allowed them to focus somewhat more on it. But across Canada West, and I know in Alberta in particular, we're really focusing on getting them back in, and not a great fear, I would say. A fear would be is that we put them into a situation where it's too much physically, because they've been training, but they've lost in some ways a year. So you don't want to put an athlete in that environment where they're not physically and mentally ready to compete. And the only thing about that is every school is the same. So it just didn't affect Mount Royal. We go into it and we're playing UFC. They're going to have lost their year trying to get back in the next few months. And I think we all need a little bit of a carrot to move us forward, right?
Well, these recruiting classes, Karla, are going to be so weird, because you're going to have those grade 11s that don't know what playing grade 12 ball is like. So that, or volleyball or whatever, they're not going to know what their grade 11 sport is like for their senior year. So they're going to go into a program, and some are just not going to be able. Canada West U Sport's going to be full, so some will go down to the ACAC. Some won't even maybe get the opportunity to play right away, because the recruiting process is going to be all over the place. Talking to the coaches and the directors that I've talked to, there's like, it's a mess. Like, you have to be really selective. I mean, talking to Lisa Tomaitis from U of S, like, her team is full already. Like, everyone wants to come back to the defending champion. So she's like, I guess we're just running back. But then I feel so bad for these grade 11s that were grade 11s that are now first year freshmen, and they never got their national championship. Like you said, those memories last forever. They never got their national championship in high school, whatever level it is. And now they're going in as a freshman in college, and they're in for a
Yep.
rude awakening. And the developmental process is going to be completely different for them skipping that year.
Yeah, and that's why you'll probably see a lot of inflated rosters this year
Yeah.
of 2 or 3 extra players. We did have some graduate. I think we had 13 or 14 student athletes who chose to graduate, and good on them, and good on the ones who made the personal decision about wanting to stay for their 5th year. But it's inflated rosters, and then if you think about it, the probably the hardest impact are the first year kids who'd never got a season to play, and the kids coming in, the student athletes coming in, because that jump, and there's a jump from high school to ACAC, and then there's a jump, and we learned it because we went from an ACAC school, long
sure did.
history in that
Yep.
conference, CCAA, to Canada West. And as prepared as we were, you never can prepare for it. And that jump from a high school to a U Sport team is even greater. And so they won't have experienced that. Even the first year kids won't know because of the competition. And so their eyes are going to be open. And the only thing saving is that it's happening across all programs,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Everyone has
it's
an equal
not a
playing
good
field.
thing,
Yeah.
but the reality is every program is in the same boat. It's not, again, just one school that this is affected. It's every Canada West school or U Sport program in every sport.
And it's so interesting too with the women's game and the men's game now for U Sport recruiting. You're now dealing with the NCAA more than you've ever had before for talent, right? Because people are seeing talents like a Kia Nurse, like an RJ Barrett, that maybe back in the day they would have gone to a Canadian school, but now they're like, well, I have a chance to make a WNBA or make an NBA, so now I'm going to take my talents down to the NCAA. So you're losing recruiting possibilities for some of those top-notch players as well.
Yeah, and I think the sport, I have my own personal feelings on it, right or wrong. There are individuals who do need to play in the States, and there's nothing wrong with the NC2A.
Yeah.
But my opinion, and I haven't been in the coaching ranks, but when I did coach, and I coached your sister at provincial team, and so I do know that briefly for a time. My experience is that many Canadians, people get caught up in the allure to NC2A. People get caught up in my son is going on a full ride. It's not a full ride. You have to pay taxes on it. And if you do the comparator, and Scott Edwards and I have had this conversation from U of A, and Scotty, and we've had this conversation of do the comparator of what it costs to stay in Canada, and if you can get scholarship money, bursary money, whatever it is, awards, versus going to the States. It's not this free ride, but there are, I'm going to say 350 universities. So a kid who's 5'10", going down there, where are you going? What's the academics? Because you do know most likely when you transfer or you come home, what you learned, you may not get a job with that degree because it's down in that state. So do the academics transfer once you get your degree? Whether you do you have the choice to come home again or not? And if you go and you sit on the bench, so I do believe, and there's a lot of national team. When I played on the national team, there's a lot of players. It was more we stayed in Canada, and over the years the tides have turned to go to the States. But I really caution parents. I used to really caution parents about that allure NC2A, because it may not be cracked up to everything it should be. And certainly our elite, there are programs they can deal with a young lady who's 6'7", 6'8". I don't have a problem admitting the NC2A is some of the best basketball in the world, but it's not for everybody.
No.
And so kids get caught up in it, but you don't want to turn your back on them, because what I remember, a lot came home. And where are they going to go if they come home? Because it didn't work out academically or playing, right? And so there's a lot to consider when that offer comes up. And if you can get over the emotional component of trying to decide where you're going, I think if you can use your head as opposed to your heart when you look at it, you could be in a better position.
Well, and I think Canada Western U Sport is really showing some growth, right? I mean, it doesn't help this country too. Of course, you're going to show a Duke and North Carolina game, but you need to do a better job of highlighting U Sport and Canada West on a national television basis. They've done a very poor job of showcasing their talent. We'll show the national championship for football with UFC versus Laval. Great, but where's that other football game or that volleyball game or that basketball game, that hockey game the rest of the year. TSN sometimes has darts on or whatever. It's like you have all these great young athletes that are bursting from the scenes, ready to showcase off their talent. That ability for them to showcase off their talent should be on those broadcasts, and you're lowering the expectations for those athletics, not broadcasting them.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think that's the decade-long question of how do we get more youth sports on TV? How do we get them shown? A good example is our hockey programs, our men's hockey. These are athletes who come from the WHL.
Yep.
So, but they're older, so they're bigger, faster, stronger because they're older, they're more mature. So the hockey is better. WHL hockey is great, but we're the next level. And
you're selling out the Saddle Dome.
Yeah, right. But people don't. It's youth sports or something, and that's wrong. And so we have to do a better job of marketing it and educating people on why, as this example, say men's hockey, that's great hockey to go watch. And in fact, many of the Canada West schools, there's 9 of them, many of them have dub or AJHL players. And so they're just older, more mature. And so you would think the evolution, they are better. So it's about educating. It's about, the fact is, the reality is that if you have a chance to watch an NC2A game versus a U Sport game, what are you going to choose? For me, part of it is who's playing.
You have the branding, right? Too.
Right. But again, it's how do we sell? So for us individually as an institution, so how does Mount Royal sell our student athletes? And then how do we sell Canada West? And then how do we sell U Sports? And we need to work through how we do it. We're at a really good crossroads right now. We had no season. Nobody did across Canada. No. Limited in how it was played down in the NC2A. They have so much more money than we do. It'll be interesting to see with that new ruling of student athletes being able to sell themselves versus the NC2A profiting off of them.
Yeah.
That's probably a whole other podcast that you could absolutely do.
I'm ready to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and the other thing I wanted to ask is about, watching the women's game. You played in 96 in Atlanta. It wasn't, I'm sure it was a fun time record wise, not as fun, obviously, going 0-5. Improved a little bit in Sydney. And I want to talk about being an Olympian, but just watching the women's game grow from when you played it to where we are now. We're heading to Tokyo, 4th ranked team in the world with a real chance to get a medal. Just the growth of this women's game and just kind of the growth you've seen from it.
Yeah. Yeah. So in 86, we were actually 3rd from a world championship. Okay. So Canada has been up, but the game has changed immensely. And I just had a conversation. There's about 16 of us from previous Olympians and friends of mine all over the world now. And we stay in contact, and it's hard to compare because and I'm biased. We were workhorses. We would train and overtrain, and we struggled offensively, but my God, we were some of the best teams I played with defensively, but we couldn't score. And the game is you have to be able to score if you're going to stop people as well, right? These young ladies are workhorses, but they're athletes. They are athletes for the most part. And I remember I was 5'9" at the time. I was one of 2 smaller players. And then everybody else was 5'10", 11. We had a couple 6'6". Their average height for the most part is 6 feet, 6'1", 6'6". They are athletic as anything. And that, if they're workhorses and have a great work ethic, is why they're 4th. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Because the coaching staff, because of the junior programs that they all came up through learning where they went to school. Many of them, if not all of them, I believe, went to the NC2A. But they're just, you combine qualities like skill sets and that's why they're fourth. And I don't personally know, I know who they are. I don't personally know any of them because I did retire in 2001.
Yeah.
But again, I know who they are, but just watching them play, and it's just like, they're faster, they're stronger. And I prided myself on being a pretty quick player, and they are faster and stronger, and they're beautiful. As a female athlete, to me, they're beautiful to watch as athletic, fit people. I see people, I don't see a female playing. I coached where I coached an athlete, but you deal with females or males. And they have you're right, they have a legit chance at a medal. First, I'm going to say probably first time. I know in 76, I believe they came in fourth. The women's team came in fourth. And you're right, my experience as an Olympian is very, very different. We had not qualified for 2 Olympics. 90, I got to get them now. 88, we failed. 92, we were 9th. And there was 8 women's teams that went. And so when we qualified in 95 for the 96, it was this huge burden off our backs to get there again. And I kind of am feeling for our men's program because there's this massive burden that just got heavier.
Yeah.
And there's lots of reasons maybe why. I'm sure they're going to do a deep, hopefully they do a deep dive as to why. It'll be interesting because I know they did a tournament, let's say 2-3 weeks ago, the women, 2 weeks ago, they were missing, I think, 4 WNBA players. So when I was ending my career, the WNBA was just starting. And Kelly Boucher was the first Canadian to play in the WNBA, and she played a year. I looked at it, and quite honestly, I wasn't good enough. I wasn't enough of a scorer, to be honest. I physically, I could have probably played at the beginning. Focus was on the Americans and keeping it homegrown. It's grown massively. We now have, I don't even know how many Canadians playing in it, but I think our women's team was missing 4, maybe 5 WNBA players. So the key to it will be, and I know Lisa's aware of this, like, how do they gel as a team without having those 4 or 5 players in
they
their
show
training
up to
camp?
Karla like 3 days before the games start.
So how does Lisa quickly and her coaching staff quickly develop that team? Now, one thing that's going for this team is many of them have been around for a few years. So the core of them, you get it back. They've been apparently, and then COVID, right? So they've been doing Zooms and they've been doing this and things like that, but really they haven't seen each other. So that tournament helped for a nucleus of them, but now you bring in the exceptional ones. And can egos be dropped? Like, I don't know these ladies. I'm going to assume yes. I'm going to assume that Lisa's aware of this. She's a fantastic, phenomenal coach. Her staff know. How do you get the egos out of the way and let's go play? Because we deserve this. We've worked hard for X number of years leading up to this moment, which was extended by 16 months. So there's other programs that are qualified that are going to the Olympics that are in the same boat, right? I don't know the numbers from other countries. I just know in Canada's situation. So that'll be interesting because it was a conversation of us. Can they gel as a team? They've got history together. So can they gel quickly as a team and put aside any kind of ego? Because I played in these last few games and I was a starter to just saying, and I think because they are 4, I think they will be able to do it. Because you don't get to be 4th by having a lot of selfish people on the team. You don't. No. Not at an international level. You get to be 4th because you have a team, and there is no individuals on that team.
No, there's a lot of hope. I wanted to go back to the Atlanta Olympics with the Olympic bombing there, and just kind of your personal story of finding out that happened and everything with that.
Yeah. Atlanta was a great experience because it was that first one for me. I have some fond memories of walking down into the opening ceremonies and those kinds of things. The bombing incident. So I had my mom and dad, my sister, my then husband, and his brother in Atlanta as well. And so we were woken up really early that morning, and basketball starts at the beginning of Olympics and then it ends. And so we were playing every other day. So the days we weren't playing, we were training and then playing a game and training. And so I can't remember if we were on an off day or a game day, but we were all woken up really early because they had to do a check of all the athletes. But then each of us then had to contact our family members to make sure they were okay. And thankfully, if my memory serves me, we had nobody that was affected by it that on my team. So a family member down there, certainly where the bombing took place, we had been in because it was near Canada House, and you could go meet and you can go walk around wherever you want. And you don't identify, because we have our dog tags, we call them, right? Our identification, you would have that with you, but there's so many people. And in particular, say Atlanta, there was so many people. And so we just made sure our families were safe. And then it became the games and the security takeover from it. The world has changed drastically from 96 with that one bombing to, 9/11 and those kinds of things. Security is tenfold more than it ever has been. And again, it wasn't a scary situation simply because at the end my family was okay, or my teammates' family were okay. We didn't know anybody, unfortunately, who lost someone or injured or anything, but you kind of don't think about those things as an athlete. You don't go in going, I wonder if there's it's higher now. It's you're all kind of always together. You don't go out alone. You're always with a teammate when you travel. You just learn these things. But that was quite the incident. And then Sydney was a totally different experience. We went in with different expectations. We went in a month before 96. We were competing. Like, we had played in a series with the Americans and we lost. So here's where I remember. We lost by 7, we lost by 11, and I can't remember the other one. We were right in playing the Americans.
That would have been a good American team too.
Mm-hmm. And so we were playing with Brazil. We were playing with those teams, those top countries, the Aussies. And I don't know if we peaked then. I don't know. Lots of reasons why, some internal maybe. We bombed like 11th. We won one game, the last game. And so we went into Sydney with different, like for me as a past experience, I went in going, let's go top 8. That's realistic. That's very achievable. You go into every game trying to win. Of course, regardless of who's on, you look at the paper and go, we have a chance to win. Now, does the game plan unfold that way is yet to be determined. But I had some teammates that were, I remember them not being happy. And I'm 36 now. I'm more real. Trust me, I'm as competitive as the next person still to this day. But I just had an experience of an Olympics where it wasn't realistic in hindsight. Let's go in top 8. If we get 1, great. If we get 2, 3, whatever we end up, right? We came 10th. My joke became, well, if I stick around for enough Olympics, I'll get into the top 8, top 10, right? 4 more years. And by then I was 36 and it was like time to move on. As my dad would say, get a real job. But 2 different experiences, one being in Atlanta. And honestly, I recall it's Coca-Cola, and it wasn't the Olympics for athletes. It was about the States. It was about how can we promote the 50th place American in how they did versus the person who won it. So very disappointing in that sense. You hear, and it is what it is. That's how I remember it. Where Sydney was about the Olympics and about the athletes and the competition, and maybe not. It was held in Sydney, right? And it's just a different feel. But I went there wanting to. So in our off days, we would practice in the morning. Or we played our games. Our schedule worked. We played in the mornings of games. So that afternoon, we would try and go. So you don't get into venues unless you have a ticket. So we would go talk to the people at the gate and say, we just want to watch the Canadian play. Will you just let us in? We'll leave afterwards. You'll hear us, so you'll know we're leaving, right? And a few of them did. Like, I think we had I can't remember what sport it was, but we had a female athlete. And we wanted to go, and we were cheering in it, and then we left. We could get into any basketball game because that's our sport, and any basketball player can get in. But I couldn't go watch volleyball and this and that. And so there were tickets available, and if you put your name on the list and were lucky to be picked, you then could go. So we would go in the afternoons to try and watch and walk around. And then that night we're resting. The next day we're training and resting because we play the next day. And that became your routine for 14 days. Well, more than that, because you go in a bit early. But those days that we had time to go do stuff, we went and did things. We went and did things as a team, and within reason. Like, we're not out 6, 7, 8 hours walking around, but you're out 2 or 3 and you're walking around, and then you get they had a busing system, and you'd get on the bus and get home, and you'd have your meals and everything, and then you're resting that night, and you're doing game plan that night for the next day and things like that. But when we had opportunities for breaks, we took, my teammates took advantage of it, because it was the first one you go to, you're just like, you're still focused when you play, but you're like, we're gonna get the medal.
Yeah.
And the next one, lucky to go to 2, like, I'm going to live a little bit as an athlete. I need to see some of these to look back on my life and go, yeah, I got more out of it this time.
What's the Olympic Village like for an athlete? Always been very interested in that.
A lot of really fit people.
Yeah.
A lot of very fit people. It's really exciting because you're walking around and you've got people from, I don't know how many different countries, and they're not all speaking English, but many, many people know English, and you get to meet. There's different areas that on a village, there's different sets of locations to eat your meals. There's one big one, but then there's other little areas. There's different, like, you could go to a dentist, you could go get your hair cut,
Really?
You could go.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, like it's like a little village. When you say a village, it's a little, there's gaming areas.
Yeah.
They have areas where you could go meet other athletes. They have I'm dating myself, but they have a disco area, right?
That's
they did
so
anyways
cool.
in
Nice.
Sydney. So you can imagine what happens when athletes are done.
Yeah.
Right? Athletes are human, and those kinds of things. People met people and got to know them better than friends.
Yes.
We were competing, and hats off. It's like, you're there to focus. Every athlete is there to focus. They're not there to meet someone. That's not their number one priority. But remember, some athletes are there for one event, and then they're done, and they can stay in the village almost the whole time, right? They don't have to leave until, I think it's 4 or 5 days after the Olympics are over. So they're out to have fun.
Yeah.
Whatever fun means to them. So it's super exciting, though, because you're just seeing so many other athletes, and you're all there to get number one, to get that gold medal. And if you think about it, so I went, there was 8, 7 teams are disappointed. In reality, do you know how lucky we are? Years later, you can look back and go, I'm so appreciative. I'm an Olympian. But when I went there, when we started losing, it was like we were really disappointed because our dreams were being crushed game after game. And someone would go, well, you got to go to it. It's like, it's more than that. When you qualify, you then go, okay, now you set your new targets or your new goals. And this is how we want to do. And this is how we think we can, what we can achieve at the Olympics. And is it realistic for gold? Well, you all set out going for gold, but the reality is 7 teams lose. And so you're disappointed. Hindsight, years later, you go, yeah, I appreciate being Olympian. I didn't achieve some goals for whatever reasons. I'm okay with it. I've learned to live with it. Would I change something? Absolutely. Maybe how I trained or a team trained or whatever. But technology nowadays and how they train, the support staff they have is very different. So the village is interesting.
I bet. What was the thing that made you fall in love with basketball?
I started playing when I was 5, and my dad was a basketball player. And my dad actually probably played till he was about 70, and he wore the chucks, the cloth chucks. He took the tape around his ankle. I started when I was 5, and it was more my parents were active. And it was more, we got into sports right away, my brother, my sister, and I. And part of it probably at the beginning is my sister's a year and a half older than I am. And I always went with her. And so I played on teams her age, and I just went up. I was lucky. I was gifted. I was born with some talent, whatever it was. I could adapt to that older age group and I didn't suffer. It probably helped me in the long run. Parents didn't know it at that time, but I also played many, many other sports up until university. But I always knew I would be a basketball player at post-secondary. So it wasn't, it probably because of my father, and we got into it. But again, I played soccer. My dad coached us in soccer, as my sister did. I always wanted to play hockey. And my mom said, it's too rough of a sport for women, right? Fair enough. I think I probably injured my face, fractured cheekbone, broke my nose. I probably did more damage playing basketball as a non-contact sport than playing hockey.
Yeah.
And I wanted to play lacrosse too, because my brother played lacrosse, and I wanted to do what the boys did, but my mom didn't like the sticks, right? And so stuck with basketball. And it took me where it took me. Very fortunate from it.
Who were some of your role models for basketball growing up?
Oh, honestly, I didn't have, when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot. I didn't think about role models. My mentors are more who I go to. I'm very thankful for my parents for instilling the values, because at the end of the day, my family kept me grounded. And I truly believe I was blessed with a skill set that I capitalized on. Doesn't make me a better person. I step outside of that field of play, and I'm the same as everybody else. I have my problems and my issues. I have good and bad. But what I did was realize early on that I have a skill set that I can capitalize on. And so my parents grounded me, my family grounded me in those values, that I need to be a good person. I probably struggled with it as a young lady, in that I was ultra competitive, aggressive. And so those don't go well when you're younger, being female. And so who was I when I played? Who was I when I stepped off the court? And a psychologist named Terry Orlick really helped me find that balance of, there's a green zone and a blue zone, and they're different. And when you play in the blue zone, that's who you are as a competitor. And when you step off in that green zone, that's who you are as a person. And it really helped find my way, because for many years I probably struggled. Like, I was very fit, and my body type was very muscular, and I attributed it to being unfeminine. But it's not. It's like, I look back and it's beautiful, and oh my God, I wish I could have the muscles now, and the physicality that I had when I was 20 or 25. But so I was very thankful for that, for different reasons for my mom and different reasons for my dad. I went out to University of Victoria, and Kathy Shields has always been a lady that I have admired and respected and loved deeply, because of what she taught me through her program and playing for her. I started out at Calgary for 2 years, and basically I had a personality conflict with the coach. And so I chose to leave, and I went and redshirted for Kathy, and best decision for me, because of what Kathy taught me as a person within a team environment, or brought out of me skills and my morals and values that I believed in, and I was able to live by them. I still do by this day. And so Kathy is still probably, outside of my parents, the most influential person I've ever had in my life.
That's awesome. A few more questions here. The Team Alberta, how did that come about?
So I was living in Edmonton, working at the World Masters Games. And when I started, I had known who Scott was, and I wanted to get into some coaching. And so I knew I didn't want to be a full-time coach. I'd given my life to playing. And I said, I can do this in my volunteer time, but I want to focus on, and I got into Alberta Summer Games and then World Masters Games. And so I called Scott one year, the first year I was there, and him and another gentleman were coaching, and he didn't really have a lot of room for me. Scott was at Concordia University College. And so I said, well, in the interim, if you're looking for someone, etc. I coached that year with at Ross Shep. I assistant coached at Ross Shep and got involved in a few club things, but mainly a high school program. And then the following year, Scott called me and said, would you like to assistant coach? And Scott's another one. Probably should have mentioned him as a mentor. He's probably, Scott let me, I have a strong personality. Scott let me coach. Scott's very knowledgeable and sure of who he is. So I think that allowed him to let me coach how I needed to. I also knew that at the end of the day, he's the head coach. I have no problems with that. There's a reason why I don't want that title. But I was able to stop practices and say stuff, right? I didn't have to be that quiet person. I think I came with, because of my history, I came with, I'm going to say the respect. I think you earn respect, but I came with some qualities that people went, okay, we're going to respect her until she screws it up. I think I earned it from athletes that I coached. I'm very black and white, but I also had lived it. Right? I had been through, I was female. I am female. I had been through it. I lived it. So I knew, and then to the next level. But I wasn't easy on them. I wasn't at Concordia. And so I started coaching with them. And that year we were very successful. And a fun story out of that, we were playing another ACAC school, and we were really good. But we were worried about being a little bit too overconfident or kind of getting sliding into not being prepared. And our ultimate goal was to go to nationals and try and win it, because we had that kind of team that year. And we were playing this game and we were up a whole bunch. So at halftime, I said to them, what's our goals? What's halftime goal? What's our end of the game goals? You guys decide the goals. And so they said, I think they said under 30. And I can't remember what they had, but I remember feeling good. And like, okay, that's going to be next to impossible. But are you sure you want 30, not 35? No, we want 30. We're going for it, right? Okay, if you don't get it, there's repercussions. So they didn't get it. And I don't remember, I think it was 8 or 9 points. They scored 38 or 39 points. But the other goals they achieved, but the one to hold the team to, they did not achieve. So the Monday at practice, I said, you're on the line. Here's the repercussions. And a bunch of them were really mad at me. We won by 40, 50 points. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
You didn't accomplish your goal. If you set a goal and say it, you said it, not me, because I would have picked 35 or 40, but you said it. You are now accountable for it. Yeah. And so I don't know if years later, if you were to ask some of them if they got that, but why I did it was they set the goal. And so I made them accountable for it, but I wasn't backing down. And trust me, when you do 8 suicides or shuttles or whatever they were, that's hard and a full practice. Yeah. And Scott let me do that, right? Like Scott let me do that because it was that important to me. I knew who the voice was. But Scott let me behind closed doors. I had no fears of saying my opinions if it different. We were united front. Scott was a newer coach up and coming. I didn't want those roles, those titles. But Scott was also very good at an early age in his career, hence the reason he got to Alberta and to the accomplishments and accolades. I have a ton of respect for Scotty. Because he cares about them as human beings, and he always demonstrated that. And at the end of the day, that's one of the most important qualities for me about a coach. How do you care about your athletes? Because they're more than just an athlete. How do you care about them as people? And what do they start out like, and where do they end their career when they graduate? And as you can tell how I speak about him, he's another exceptional human being, and there's reasons why he's as successful and he gets the recruits. Your sister went there and things like that. So that's that Concordia, and then how it rolled into his provincial team. And I, again, under Scotty, we were very successful. We had fantastic athletes come through as well. Like I recognize that. Katie played provincial team, the Plouffe sisters.
Vermont.
Yeah, like we had some amazing athletes in the time we coached. I also knew I didn't want to coach younger kids because I didn't have the patience to teach them things, right? Like
Yeah.
these 16, 17-year-olds, when you say, do this, set the screens, they understand it. Now repetitive training for them to get it, but they understand the concept. And for me, it was, I needed to learn how to put what I knew in my head of how to do as an athlete into words. And that's where I struggled as a coach. And I went, okay, these kids get it. I can work with them. I couldn't work with the younger kids. It's not the younger kids couldn't work with me. It was my communications I had to learn how to do and develop as a coach. So that's kind of the evolution of Scotty. And then after 4 years, it was, my boss actually said to me, are you a coach or are you an admin side? You need to decide and start focusing on what you want to choose. We just need to know. And by that time I was at Mount Royal, right? And it was like, no, I don't want to coach. And I also know I don't want to spend my summers coaching because I didn't pick coaching as my profession after I retired.
But at least you got the taste of it.
I did. And then my partner and I, we never had children. So I never got, probably maybe a good thing. And not having children, but never got into coaching the young kids. And if they're coaching and they're playing basketball, is it really fair? Who knows how I would have, it probably would have been better if they got into another sport. And so I couldn't coach them or I'd have to learn, or my husband would have, but we never had children. So it wasn't a dilemma we had to face.
And then the last question, with the, being a former Olympian, I know one of your colleagues, David Legge, was a big component of the Calgary Olympics coming. Did you play any role in trying to help get the Olympics here? And overall, what was your feeling when the bid got denied?
I did not. When I retired, I stayed away. And one of the things I chose to do, right or wrong, is I don't automatically let people know I'm an Olympian or two-time Olympian. That was a lifetime ago. And I got into the admin side and I wanted my administration to speak for itself and my work I do there. I've since realized that it's part of my, the grain of who I am. It almost sounds like I was embarrassed about that. I'm never, certainly not that, but this is who I am. And oh, by the way, I've gone to Olympics. Okay. Cause it changes then. People go, oh, okay. I was, and I know David was, as an outsider watching, very disappointed. I think,
specifically how the vote went and people not being as educated.
Yeah, and how the vote went. Like, I can get older people voting and saying, I don't want to pay taxes for that. I'm not even going to be alive for it. But when you have generations of kids coming up, you need to build for generations coming up. And in hindsight, and forget COVID, but all the facilities and all the upgrades and those things, you think of some things that Vancouver now has. I was personally disappointed. But there are the naysayers of sport, right? And so you try and work with them, you try and educate them. So if you're active as a child, is it sports? Is it music? Is it, what are you into so that you're not into trouble, right?
Exactly.
My avenue was sport. I tried to play musical instruments and I'm terrible. I still think I'm tone deaf. So what is your avenue to keep you active and busy and activity? And now overseeing recreation, athletics and recreation are similar. One is high level and one is you come in from the rec side, you go to the high level if you're fortunate, and then you end your career and your life on the rec side of things. And so it's the whole circle of sport. And I personally believe, biased maybe, hosting the Olympics would have really, really helped in who we are and really boosted, but there's an upfront cost to it. And so it was really disappointing for our city not to go the other way. And hopefully we're not paying for it for years and years. Calgary is a great city. We have the ability, you look at Edmonton's, I loved living in Edmonton when I worked for the World Masters Games, but they host a lot. And for their size and their drive, I'm hoping that the shift with Active City and with David and others, I'm hoping that the drive to start hosting more, at least applying to host more, increases. because we have the ability. We've demonstrated time and time again, we have the ability to do it with people, with interest, with vested funds, etc. I don't know if we were, as Calgarians, given the full picture. I don't know.
I don't. Just being a reporter at that time and talking to individuals and say, well, we need to focus on the arts. I'm like, we can't focus on both? I don't understand. But somebody's like, well, no, because they were taken away from the arts. I'm like, where did you hear this from? Oh, I was told by this person. That's not a thing. They're not taken away from the arts. It's a separate thing. And like, I got the tax thing. Sure, I understand that. But, I talked to a lot of people like, well, they're taken away from the arts. I'm like, who's taken away from the arts? I don't understand where
it's
you're going.
It's not one or the other.
No.
It's how can we do this in unison? And
it seemed like the arts community felt attacked at times during it.
Yeah.
With some of the people I got a chance to do streeters with and have conversations with. And I'm like, I think the vote happened really fast, and I don't think there's people that were educated enough in the process. It's unfortunate how it happened. It would have been really exciting. You see like how a Kawhi shot helps build basketball, how a World Juniors helps build hockey consistently, and just hockey as a culture. I think having a World Cup in Canada in 2026 is going to help build the game of soccer. And like you said, having those facilities built would help. I mean, maybe we would have a new stadium that's not McMahon, right? Which would have been huge to host stuff. We would have maybe had a 2026 World Cup potentially there. WinSport's a great facility, but I'd love to have more WinSports in this city.
Yeah. And then it becomes a facility for all. It's just not for elite training, because they have their spots, WinSport, etc.
Yeah.
And they need their spots, but it becomes a facility that is used by all. So now we're getting into recreation and recreating and activity and being active and all the many, many scientifically proven that help people with life, dealing with COVID, right? Dealing with mental illnesses, right? It all really, really helps. And we have aging infrastructure. So yes, upfront, it would have cost us, but the costs coming back, the benefits coming back would have been huge. At least 5 times huge. And so that's disappointing and short-term investment for a long-term gain, right? And so it's unfortunate. Yep.
My last question for you, and again, thank you for your time. And this one I got asked by readers all the time, and it's something I've pondered. So obviously the transfer from the ACAC was a difficult one. I know as being a state broadcaster the last few years, it has sucked not having that rivalry. I just missed it, getting to call that game. But Crow Child Classics turned out to be terrific. But to add to the Crow Child Classic, Mount Royal and football, has there ever been discussions about having a football program at Mount Royal? And I'm sure you've been asked this a million times.
You went there.
I know.
Okay, so absolutely. Because in the 60s, we had football. And not soccer, but football.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been asked probably 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. We went down the road and we did a comparator of why right now, or then, we couldn't bring on football, because it's bigger than football. Football is a team of 100, 75 to 100 males. So what's the counter, right? How do we counter? So it's not just adding football, it's adding the sports to counter the opportunity for another gender. And in this case, sports is the one place where you have to pick being female or male. You can identify as another athlete, a different gender, and play on those sports, but it's the only one where you say, I am either female or male. So when you bring on a football program and the cost, and you bring on the other programs, I don't know how many it would be, and the cost, I'm not doing it to bring the football and then going, okay, we're going to partially bring on. We don't have facilities. Yeah, you can rent. We don't have sports med. There's so many things. So it's at that time, it was probably a $10 million investment. I kid you not, because of all the other things. And it means equal scholarship, equal opportunity. So
and where you're going to play.
Right? Before they even play. It's those kinds of things so it's bigger than just adding on a sport.
Yeah.
We are also in the last 6 years, et cetera, gone through financial difficulties where I'm a firm believer in doing less and better. So even the addition of another sport, and we get asked all the time, what about, say, swimming? Let's bring back swimming, or rugby, or rugby sevens. We can't fund our programs, the 8 of them, to the level we need it at right now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spread that dollar thinner. Now, I report to someone who reports to a president or vice president for president. So if our president was to say, consider it, I would build a case of why or why not. And I would make it as objective as possible to say, here's why or why not it would be. I don't have the staff, because if you talk to any football school, they almost have their own staff on their own, admin staff, to do eligibility, to do compliance, to do all of those advising, all of those things. You're talking 100, at least 85 to 100 new student athletes just for football. Now you add in, and it doesn't have to be 100 spots for women, but you have to add in 2 or 3 more teams and opportunities for women to counter so that gender equity is there. I wouldn't add in a female sport without considering a male sport. I won't do that the reverse either, right? Yeah. So in my day, not sure in particular, because post-secondary continues to be have their funding in question. There's a little bit of stability, say, for Mount Royal, but post-secondary has a funding with grants and things like that. And I won't do it where a program has to fund itself. I'm not doing it like the Rams football with Regina. They're an outside entity. They represent the Rams for Regina, but I'm not going to do it that way, because now you get into a board over running a football program. But ultimately, I'm responsible for those student athletes from a board. Like, it's really complex how their AD has to run it and how it has to operate as its own entity, whatever sport it is, but it represents Regina. So never say never, but I'm not looking to add any sport. Never mind, not even just football.
All right. Well, number one, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for being, help being a part of our Olympic team and everything you've done and added to the women's game, and being a mentor to my sister as a player, and more importantly, being a guest on the show today. I really appreciate your time, Karla.
You're welcome. I've really enjoyed this. Take care. And we'll see you when we get out of COVID, I guess. But Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Until next time, folks, cheers and enjoy the day, people.